Some of you out there seem to be under the impression that the press loves Hillary Clinton. And I try to say again and again, there's actually a lot of tension between the press corps and the former First Lady, has been for 25 years. And in fact, the press has been on her case about the private email server, a story broken by the New York Times. But every once in a while something happens where I have to say it's a huge double standard. And one of those instances is when Hillary Clinton the other day said this.
Extreme views about women, we expect that from some of the terrorist groups. We expect that from people who don't want to live in the modern world. But it's a little hard to take coming from Republicans who want to be the President of the United States.
So let's just take that in for a minute. The leading Democratic candidate for President of the United States likens her Republican rivals to terrorists, to people who are butchering women and children, beheading journalists and other hostages. She likens them to terrorists. Now, you would think that there would be a huge uproar in the media about this. Why did she use such incendiary language? What is she thinking? Is she so desperate to change the subject from emails that she's now trying to pull kind of a Trumpian maneuver and say something that she knows will bring her lots and lots of attention so that she can talk about women's health issues? And yet, there's been very little of that other than among some commentators. In fact, the New York Times didn't even publish a story as of Friday in its newspaper. It ran a 7-paragraph item online that just basically said Hillary said this, Republicans objected. And then you turn to the network newscasts, and to my utter amazement, reporters and anchors are saying things like, Hillary talks tough, Hillary gets aggressive. Not, why on earth is Hillary using a terrorist analogy? And you look at the things that make news and when Republicans say them, and you know, and the idea that they are treated differently is just inescapable. Mike Huckabee talks about President Obama, you know, with his Iran deal, is helping shepherd the Israelis to the ovens. That was hugely controversial, and rightly so. And every time somebody invokes Hitler or the Holocaust or compares their political opponents to some awful figures, either in world history or on the world stage today, we should be all over it. Now, some of this is subjective. Is it over the top for Hillary Clinton to say this or not? But at the very least, it ought to be an issue. And yet, not because journalists believe that Republicans like terrorists, but because they don't see anything unusual about that kind of rhetoric if a female Democratic candidate is using it to describe the attitudes toward women by Republicans. I mean, I wonder if some of this is just unconscious, subconscious, or just, you know, I think it's inexplicable. And I think it helps feed the notion that the press does take sides, and particularly on cultural issues, because we're talking about women's issues, we're talking about abortion, we're talking about Planned Parenthood. Those Planned Parenthood videos clearly they got some coverage in some of the mainstream media, but nothing like the outrage it might have been if it was an issue on the right. And so in this instance, I just think it's indefensible. Now, you can say Hillary Clinton is not doing anything different than Donald Trump does when he talks about Mexican immigrants being rapists and so forth. Fine, let's have that debate. Let's have that story. Let's have that coverage. But to just sort of yawn and say, well, Hillary Clinton said this, and yes, some Republicans didn't like it, is kind of missing the point that the media often go nuts when it comes to inflammatory and incendiary rhetoric. And here we have a classic case of that, and what it got was a big, fat yawn.